Are you overtraining, and what does overtraining look like? I wanted to make this video because I think it might help a few of you just kind of go back and look at some of your stats and your results just to see whether it might be worth taking 3-4 days off, or even just committing to maybe a week of completely zone 2 training. To start with, guys, I am basically using heart rate data that I've taken from my races, as well as heart rate data that I'm taking from everyday life, where I use my Oura ring to check my resting heart rate for things like when I sleep. Now, the reason this video is actually quite interesting is because if you look at my results and my performance, I'm actually on an incline, so I am improving. If you take a look at my Zwift Power app, I'm not really sure what a lot of these stats are talking about, but what you can see is my results here just kind of improving steadily. And then if you look at my Zwift Power, you will also see that my watts per kg and my general watts are definitely heading in the right direction. So how can I still consider myself to be overtraining when I'm still improving pretty reasonably well? One of the things that prompted me to make this video in the first place was my heart rate whilst I was racing, and it's a thing that I talk about a few times in some of my racing videos. So this video here is a clip from when we are racing, which was at the time the hardest race I've ever done, which was the Volcano Circuit. It was a Cat B race, prime time, tons of people, and it went really hard. There was one particular climb in it where you have to really work to stay with the group. This race was 5 laps, so you had to keep repeating this small climb every time. Now, usually I would probably say that my heart rate should really be spiking at the point when I actually get dropped off the group, because I am working my hardest to try and stay on. It's effectively my version of a sprint finish, or my version of working to complete max just to try and hold the back of the group. What you will notice as we come up this climb, that my heart rate, even though it's in the 160s, kind of only really gets to 169 at the absolute most. If I compare this to some of my heart rates from a few months ago, I was easily in the 170s. So that kind of was my first indicator. But more important than that was the fact that it didn't stay high for very long, as in it wasn't able to climb up, and then I was not able to hold it. So even if I did hit my heart rate max, it just wasn't very high for very long. This is a classic indicator of having a bit of maybe muscular fatigue, where I wasn't able to work hard enough physically, but also your heart is a muscle, so it's just general fatigue from your aerobic system. Now, after 4 days rest, if you look at this video, you will then be able to see that I get my heart rate into the 170s, and I consider anything over kind of 170, 171 to be close to my heart rate max. And I think I've seen maybe a 175 at one time or another whilst doing Zwift races. But you'll also see that not only did I get it into the 170s, I was able to hold it there for a longer period of time. Really good indicator that having 4 days of rest really did help my heart and my aerobic system to recover, and I was able to hold that threshold for a little bit longer. Again, this video being taken from the time when I am dropped off the back of the front group. The second thing I want to look at is my resting heart rate. Now, this is a little bit different to what you might consider when it comes to how to tell whether you're overtraining, because it actually involves doing nothing. In fact, less than nothing. This is taken whilst I'm sleeping. To give you an idea, what happens is I use an Oura ring, and it gives me my effectively lowest resting heart rate for the period when I sleep. And I will show you what these look like normally. Kind of in and around that kind of 40 to 45 beats per minute as I sleep, and my lowest point. Now, what happens is that when I train really hard, or when you train really hard and you get stressed, and stress can be anything from emotional stress, physical stress, stress from work, life. Stress is stress, you produce cortisol. Cortisol can interrupt your hormone cycle, which basically means you don't get the same quality of sleep, which obviously affects your recovery, but also affects the way that you produce testosterone. Stay with me. I'll give you a quick indicator of why this is important. If you look here, I've got my resting heart rate for when I sleep the night before I did what was probably one of my hardest outdoor events, where I try and set my 100-mile PB with the guys racing back in September. You will see that the night after that, which is the Sunday night after the event, my resting heart rate whilst I sleep is super high. I do not get the same quality of sleep. basically showing me that if my cortisol levels are super high, my body is super stressed, you are just not recovering in the same way. So that's a one-off example. But what I did notice as I have been training harder over the last few weeks and building the intensity, my general state of resting heart rate when I sleep has been staying a little bit higher, up in the 48 beats per minute, when I try and like to kind of get it down to the 40 beats per minute or even below. So what happened when I took a few days off? Here are the 4 days that I took off. You will see that immediately, as soon as I do nothing, and that was nothing, a complete rest day, my heart rate drops straight back down to 38 as the lowest point for when I was sleeping. Now I will add here that even though I am single, I am dating someone. So most of the time I have the bed to myself, I spend the night on my own, and I can get a really good quality night's sleep. The second night of my 4 days of rest, I was joined by my partner who had the worst night's sleep ever. And then she decided to make sure that she told me about it every 20 minutes through the night. So ultimately, it wasn't a really good quality night's sleep, but you can still see that my resting heart rate was around 42. So again, no cortisol, no interruption of my hormone production, so I get a better quality of sleep. And then you can see the next 2 days, it comes down again. And then you can see that as I race on the Monday night and go hard again, obviously racing in the evening, that cortisol does affect my sleep quality again, and you can see my resting heart rate as I sleep is a bit higher. So what am I trying to say here? If you are training hard, and I use my 3 pillars when it comes to training, which is rest, intensity, and volume, you can only really work on one at a time, that if you're going to work on your intensity, then you are definitely affecting the way that you're able to rest and recover. All the Zwift racing, all the training that I've been trying to do to improve is definitely working because my results are going up. But I did notice that my heart rate was something that was suffering as a consequence. So taking these 4 days of rest, or maybe even longer, was a really good way to kind of bring it back down and kind of reset the bar. I guess this whole video is just about trying to let you guys know that if you keep an idea or keep an eye on your heart rate, then you can kind of identify some of the things that might be considered overtraining before they actually become an issue. People talk about, or there is a thing called REDS, which is relative energy deficit, when you just feel like you're completely fatigued. Now, if you're watching this, the chances are you're always feeling tired anyway because you like riding on Zwift, you like cycling your bike. A general level of fatigue is kind of something that we accept as normal. When it comes to RED, it's completely different. You get to the point where you can't even walk up the stairs without feeling tired. We do not want to get there. That's the point we want to avoid, which is why paying attention to these things is very important. And I will also add, as the last thing for the video, that even though I took 4 or 5 days off, you can see that it didn't affect my performance in any way, shape or form. I haven't lost any fitness over those 4 or 5 days as I dive straight back into a race and kind of hold myself pretty well, and I'm still maintaining that upwards curve. So here we go, guys. That's what I would suggest to you. Just keep an eye on a few things, and one of which would be your resting heart rate when you are doing nothing, as well as your working heart rate and how high you can hold and maintain that for. And if those aren't quite kind of performing as you have seen in the past, maybe just think about bringing the intensity right down for a few days, or even just taking that time completely off. And then you can start the cycle again. I like to periodize my training, so I do 3 or 4 weeks of training, have a little rest, and then come back and start again. And effectively, you just keep trying to bump your fitness up each time. So ask yourself now, are you overtraining, and what can you do about it? Let me know in the comments if this was helpful, and I will see you guys in a Zwift race soon.